Everyone says you only need a 5-gallon pot to grow cherry tomatoes. It's on the nursery tag, in every gardening blog, in 1,000 YouTube videos. I believed it too, until I saw why balcony gardeners keep hitting the same wall. The plant starts strong, fast growth, lush leaves, tiny green tomatoes everywhere. Then, almost overnight, it breaks. Lower leaves yellow, top leaves curl in the afternoon heat. You're watering morning, afternoon, sometimes a third time before sunset. Flowers drop. Fruit stalls at marble size. Some split before they ripen. What does mature tastes bland? You blame yourself. Not enough water, needs more fertilizer. My balcony doesn't get enough sun. But what if none of that's the real problem? What if the mistake happened before you planted anything? Here's the truth nobody explains. The 5-gallon rule is one of the most misunderstood ideas in container gardening. Most 5-gallon pots don't hold 5 true gallons of soil, and even a real one isn't big enough for most cherry tomato varieties people grow today. That's the trap. Small fruit doesn't mean small plant. Indeterminate varieties can send a single vine 8, 10, 12 feet long in one season. Above the soil, it's reaching for light. Below it, the roots are trying to do the same thing. Cram that root system into a pot half its size, and you're not making the plant compact, you're putting it under constant stress. Stressed plants don't make good fruit. Today I'm giving you more than a pot size. I'm giving you the entire system, the right variety, the right sunlight, the right container material, the soil that actually matters more than fertilizer, watering without guesswork, avoiding blossom end rot, and how to support, prune, and harvest for months, not weeks. And yes, exactly why the 5-gallon rule quietly wrecks more harvests than almost any other piece of gardening advice. By the end, you'll know how to grow cherry tomatoes on a balcony from first purchase to final harvest, a system where every piece supports the next. Let's start where every good tomato harvest actually begins. Underground. Why does a container, just a few gallons too small, make such a huge difference? Why do healthy plants suddenly stop growing right when they're supposed to peak? Why do roots stop spreading out and start circling the inside of the pot instead? Why does that drainage layer of gravel everyone adds actually leave roots sitting in wetter soil? Two gardeners buy the same variety, plant the same weekend, water just as often. Why do they end the season with completely different harvests? Why does one balcony fill bowls with sweet tomatoes, while the one next door barely ripens a handful? Why do some gardeners water twice a day, and their plants still look thirsty by afternoon? Why does blossom end rot hit one container and skip the one right beside it? Why do some tomato plants turn into tall forests of leaves and barely fruit at all? Why does your balcony's direction, north, south, east, west, change almost everything? Why can wine dry out a container faster than a heat wave? Why do dark pots cook healthy roots? Why can a small dwarf variety outproduce a bigger one just by sitting in the right container? And why do experienced growers obsess over roots while everyone else stares at the leaves? Because here's what most gardening advice gets backwards. People treat symptoms: yellow leaves, wilting, split fruit, poor harvests, blossom end rot, weak growth. None of that is where the problem starts. It's the end of a chain reaction that began weeks earlier underground, inside the container. A tomato doesn't care what the pot's label says. It responds to one thing: its environment, root space, airflow, how water moves through the soil, sunlight, the balance between roots, stems, flowers, and fruit. Get those working together, and growing tomatoes gets easy. Get them fighting each other, and no fertilizer on earth will save you. So forget another list of disconnected tips. Let's build the complete system, one decision at a time, starting with the one almost every balcony gardener gets wrong. By the end of this video, you won't just know what pot to buy. you'll know how to grow cherry tomatoes from the day you bring home a seedling to the final harvest. Here's what we are covering. First, the truth behind the 5-gallon rule, nursery sizing versus true growing volume, how root space affects production, which container size actually matches which tomato. Second, choosing the right variety before you plant. The wrong tomato can cap your harvest before you've even filled a pot with soil. Third, building the ideal environment underground. A simple container soil recipe that drains fast, holds moisture, and keeps roots breathing through summer heat. Fourth, planting it right. How deep to plant, why buried stems grow extra roots, and the small mistakes that quietly cut production weeks later. Fifth, positioning for success. How much sun cherry tomatoes actually need. What changes if your balcony faces north, south, east, or west? How reflected heat affects watering, when afternoon shade becomes an advantage. Sixth, building support. Stakes, cages, vertical strings, balcony trellises, and how the right support boosts airflow, fruit quality, and disease resistance. Seventh, mastering watering. Not more water, smarter water. Why consistent moisture beats constant watering, and how to break the drought and flood cycle that stresses container tomatoes. Eighth, preventing the big problems before they show up. Blossom end rot, cracked fruit, root-bound plants, heat stress, poor pollination. Balcony gardening has changed fast. More people live in apartments now. Backyards became patios. Patios became balconies. But the drive to grow your own food only got stronger. That's why cherry tomatoes exploded as a container crop. Productive, beautiful, producing for months, and warm off the vine, they taste nothing like the ones from a supermarket. So why do so many balcony gardeners end the season disappointed? Not because tomatoes are hard, because containers play by different rules. In a garden bed, roots roam feet in every direction for water and nutrients. In a pot, every root the plant will ever grow is locked in one small space. Every drop of water, every pocket of air, every nutrient, every degree of heat, all of it lives inside that container. That's why small mistakes turn into big problems fast. Too small a pot dries out quicker. Bad soil loses oxygen, roots stall, flowers abort, fruit quality drops. None of that happens because tomatoes are fragile. It happens because container plants feel everything more intensely than plants in open ground. Here's the good news. University trials confirm it again and again. Get container size, growing media, and watering right, and container tomatoes can produce almost as much as tomatoes grown in the ground. Your balcony isn't the limitation. The system is. Understand that system, and every mystery problem suddenly makes sense. Let's build it, starting with the first decision. Most gardeners buy the plant first, then scramble to figure out what container it needs. That's backwards. The variety decides everything that comes after. Cherry tomatoes split into two growth habits, determinate and indeterminate. Determinate varieties stop at a set size. They flower over a shorter window, ripen most of their crop together, then wind down. On a balcony, they're easier, their roots stay compact. Indeterminate varieties never stop, not until frost or disease ends them. One vine can stretch 10 feet or more, still flowering while older fruit ripens below. That's why they're so productive. It's also why they demand serious root space. Plant an indeterminate variety in a tiny container, and you've already capped what it can become. Small balcony, look for compact or dwarf cherry varieties bred specifically for containers. They give continuous harvests without vines that swallow your space. Don't force a giant plant into a tiny home. Pick a plant built for apartment living. Everything gets easier from there. You've heard it 100 times. Use a 5-gallon pot. Here's why that advice fails. First, most nursery containers labeled 5 gallons don't actually hold 5 gallons of soil. Advertised size isn't usable volume. Second, and this matters more, even a true 5-gallon pot isn't enough for most indeterminate cherry tomatoes. As roots fill the space, they stop exploring, they start circling the wall. Eventually they compete with themselves for water and oxygen. The plant survives. Survival isn't thriving. For indeterminate varieties, aim for 15 to 20 gallons of true growing volume whenever your balcony can support it. Growing dwarf or determinate, 7 to 10 gallons is plenty. Material matters just as much as size. Plastic holds moisture but traps heat around the roots. Terracotta stays cooler but dries fast. Fabric pots trigger air pruning. Root tips stop growing when they hit air, which fires off hundreds of new feeder roots behind them. More feeder roots, better water uptake, better nutrient uptake, better harvests. The container isn't just holding your tomato, it's shaping the entire root system your harvest depends on. Buy the perfect container, fill it with the wrong soil. That's what most beginners do. Garden soil belongs in the garden. Inside a container it compacts, it drains slow, it suffocates roots. Roots need two things equally, water and oxygen. Take away either one and growth stalls. The goal isn't holding water, it's creating tiny air spaces that stay open after every watering. A bark-based mix does this best. Pine bark fines for structure, perlite for porosity, peat moss or coconut coir to hold moisture without waterlogging. One solid ratio, 5 parts pine bark fines, 1 part perlite, 1 part peat or coir. Now let's bust a myth, the gravel layer. For decades, people layered rocks at the bottom for drainage. It sounds logical, it's wrong. Water doesn't drain faster once it hits gravel. It stays suspended higher in the pot instead, pooling right where your roots live. Skip the gravel, fill the container with the same well-draining mix, top to bottom. Your roots will thank you. This step takes minutes, it shapes your whole harvest. Tomatoes do something most vegetables can't. Every tiny hair on the stem can turn into a root once buried. That's why growers strip the lowest leaves and plant deeper than the nursery pot. The buried stem grows extra roots. Extra roots mean more stability, more water uptake, more nutrients all season. Before planting, mix a slow-release fertilizer into your growing media. Follow the label. This feeds the young plant while its roots establish. After planting, water thoroughly, not just the surface, soak the entire root ball, kill every hidden air pocket around those new roots. Foundation built. Now placement decides what happens next. How much sun do cherry tomatoes actually need? 6 to 8 hours of direct sun. More helps up to a point. Because your balcony creates its own microclimate. South-facing, intense afternoon heat bounced off walls and glass. East-facing, cooler morning sun. West-facing, an oven by late afternoon. North-facing, the least light, tough for big indeterminate vines. North-facing doesn't mean no tomatoes. It means variety choice matters more. Compact varieties bred for lower light will outperform sprawling vines there every time. Before you plant, watch your balcony for a few days. Where does the sun start? When does shade move in? Does wind pick up in the afternoon? Those small observations tell you exactly where to put your containers for the best light and airflow. Sunlight doesn't just fuel growth, it drives flowering, fruit production, sweetness. Get this right, and everything after it gets easier. The biggest support mistake isn't skipping it, it's adding it too late. A young tomato looks compact for weeks, then it explodes, new shoots daily, flower clusters forming, fruit adding weight fast. That's when the stem, the one that looked sturdy enough, starts leaning toward the light. That's when it breaks, branches snap, fruit trusses tear off, the plant burns energy recovering instead of producing. Support goes in early, before the plant needs rescuing, not after. Determinate variety, a sturdy cage does the job. Indeterminate vine, think vertical, bamboo stake, metal spiral, a trellis bolted to the wall, garden twine hung from above. As it grows, tie the vine every 8 to 12 inches with soft ties or clips, loose enough to move. You're supporting the stem, not choking it. Good support does more than hold the plant up. It boosts airflow, gets light to more leaves, keeps fruit off wet soil, makes pruning easier, makes harvesting easier, cuts disease from crowded leaves. Support is the skeleton your harvest grows on. One habit separates thriving balcony tomatoes from struggling ones: not more water, consistent water. Tomatoes hate extremes: bone dry, then soaking wet an hour later. That swing stresses roots, cracks fruit, drops flowers, and blocks calcium from moving where it's needed. Stop asking, how often should I water? Ask, is the root zone staying consistently moist? Cool week, water every few days. Hot, windy week, every morning. Large containers dry slower than small ones. Fabric dries faster than plastic. South-facing dries faster than north. There's no universal schedule. Let the soil tell you. Push a finger 2 inches in. Moist. Wait, dry. Water deeply until it drains from the bottom. 1 deep watering beats 3 light splashes every time. Travel often. A sub-irrigated planter stores water in a reservoir below. The soil pulls up moisture as needed. Fewer swings, healthier roots, more reliable fruit. Even the best potting mix runs dry on nutrients eventually. Every tomato your plant produces is built from what's stored in that container. No garden bed underneath. No endless supply waiting below. That's why container tomatoes need regular feeding once flowering starts. Early on, the plant needs nitrogen to build stems and leaves. As flowering ramps up, its needs shift toward nutrients that drive flowering and fruit. That doesn't mean cutting nitrogen completely. It means feeding steadily all season instead of dumping it in occasionally. Follow the label on your fertilizer. More isn't better. Overfeeding builds giant leafy plants with almost no fruit. The healthiest tomato plant isn't the one growing fastest, it's the one growing steadily. Few topics spark more debate than pruning. Remove every sucker, leave them all. Depends on the variety. Indeterminate tomatoes keep growing all season. Removing some suckers directs energy, boosts airflow, and keeps sprawling vines manageable on a balcony. Determinate and dwarf varieties play differently. Heavy pruning cuts production. Many flower clusters form on growth you might accidentally cut off. Whatever the variety, always remove yellowing leaves near the base. They're old, unproductive, and a magnet for disease once they stay damp. Also strip leaves touching the container or hanging near the soil. Cleaner airflow, healthier plant. Pruning isn't punishment, it's ventilation. Here's something surprising. Tomato flowers don't need bees. Each flower has both male and female parts, but it still needs vibration. Outdoors, wind and insects handle it. On a sheltered balcony surrounded by walls, that vibration often never comes. Flowers opening but barely any fruit forming, give it a hand. Around midday, when pollen is driest, gently tap or shake each flowering cluster. A few seconds is enough. That tiny vibration can transform your harvest. Sometimes the smallest fix makes the biggest difference. Few problems scare beginners more than blossom end rot. The fruit looks healthy, then a dark, sunken patch appears at the bottom. Most people rush to buy calcium supplements. Here's the surprise: your soil probably already has enough calcium. The real problem is inconsistent watering. Calcium travels through the plant with water. When moisture swings between bone dry and soaking wet, calcium can't reach the fruit fast enough. It's not a lack of calcium in the soil, it's a lack of calcium arriving where it's needed. That's why the fix is everything you've already built: the right container, the right soil, consistent watering, healthy roots. Prevent the stress, blossom end rot mostly disappears. Now the reward. Cherry tomatoes tell you when they're ready: full color, slightly soft, Detach with a gentle twist. Have to pull hard, wait another day. Harvest often, don't leave ripe fruit hanging. The more mature fruit the plant carries, the more energy it spends holding onto them instead of growing new flowers. Frequent harvesting drives continued production. One bowl today makes another bowl more likely next week. That's how you keep cherry tomatoes producing for months, not weeks. Look back at where we started. This was never really about a 5-gallon pot. It was about why balcony tomatoes succeed or fail. Already spotting mistakes in your own setup? Subscribe now. Next video, we build on this foundation with a stage-by-stage feeding schedule, keeping cherry tomatoes producing from first flowers to final harvest. One question for you: what kind of balcony are you growing on? South-facing, north-facing, small apartment balcony, big terrace? Tell me in the comments. Your answers shape what I cover next. One more piece left, something most gardeners never think about until it's too late. Everything so far assumes one thing: your balcony can safely hold your growing system. Containers get heavy fast once watered. A large fabric pot full of moist soil can weigh far more than you'd expect. Add several containers, furniture, people, the load stacks up quick. Using large containers, spread them out instead of clustering. Put the heaviest ones closest to the building, where the structure is strongest. Unsure about weight limits? Check your building documents or ask your property manager before you expand. Wind matters just as much. Balconies act like wind tunnels. Strong gusts dry leaves fast, dry soil faster, and topple tall, unsupported vines. Secure large plants well. Go heavier on containers if your spot is windy, or position pots where walls and railings block wind without blocking sun. Your balcony isn't just where tomatoes grow. It's part of the system. Now let's put it all together. A productive balcony tomato isn't one miracle product. It's every decision supporting the next. You chose a variety that matched your space, gave its roots room to grow, filled the container with a light, breathable mix, planted deep for stronger roots, placed it where sunlight works for you, supported the vine before it needed rescuing, watered consistently, not reactively, fed steadily, not excessively, pruned for airflow, helped pollination when nature needed a hand, harvested often to keep new flowers coming. You built the whole system around healthy roots instead of chasing symptoms above the soil. Notice something. The 5-gallon trap was never really about the container. It was about believing one decision could fix everything. That's not how balcony gardening works. Healthy plants get built, one right decision at a time. When every layer supports the next, the plant stops fighting to survive. It starts doing what it was built to do. Grow, flower, fill bowl after bowl with sweet cherry tomatoes. You've built something most gardeners never do, not just a tomato plant, a complete growing system. But even the best system shifts as the season moves. The nutrients your tomato needs while growing leaves aren't the ones it needs setting flowers, and those aren't the ones it needs carrying dozens of ripening fruit. That's exactly what's next: a complete feeding schedule, transplant to final harvest, what to feed, when to feed, how much, and just as important, what to stop feeding as the season shifts. Haven't subscribed? Now's the time. Every video here builds on the last. We're not collecting random tips. We're building systems that actually work. Before you go, one thing in the comments. What's your biggest balcony challenge right now? Too much sun, too much wind, limited space, or still fighting that 5-gallon pot? I want to know. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.